you follow me on Twitter, there are a couple of topics that I've been hitting on pretty hard lately. Number one, and I've been hitting on this since the bill passed back over the summer in New Hampshire, which does technically have an anti CRT bill, you can still teach critical race theory in the schools. It's because when they passed the bill, my Rhino Governor Chris Sununu worked with his Republican cronies to support the Democrats and built in a whole bunch of loopholes to still fully allow critical race theory to be taught in schools. I bring this up because sometimes people think when you ban CRT, the problem is solved. Nothing else to do here. That's not the case. In my case in New Hampshire, critical race theory is absolutely still being taught in the schools completely legally. But there's another thing I've been hammering home lately that I think is really important for our conversation today. The difference between critical race theory and social emotional learning, because a lot of influencers, and I understand why they're doing it, but a lot of influencers are saying social emotional learning is a Trojan horse to deliver CRT. Well, kind of, but not really. And the problem is that social emotional learning is its own beast. And when you conflate the two, when you say social emotional learning is just about delivering critical race theory, what ends up happening is parents who are busy people who don't have a lot of time to be digging into all the nuance. When you teach them that social emotional learning and CRT go together, what happens when you ban CRT is that parents think, oh my God, the problem's solved. That social emotional learning thing, that was just about getting critical race theory out. That was just about getting critical race theory out. If we ban critical race theory, I don't need to worry about it. No, 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 no. No, no, no. That's not how that works. And to prove it, I want to share with you this article that came up today. New Hampshire high school student sues district and principal after he was suspended for saying there are only two genders on the school bus and in text message with another student. This isn't critical race theory, folks. This is social emotional learning. And in the state of New Hampshire, and in probably many other places, it is still completely legal. Even in those places that have banned CRT in schools, this is still happening. It is still going on. It is still legal, and people need to know about this. Listen, I'm not hitting on these topics to be a big meanie. I swear to God, I don't keep hammering on the difference between these things over and over and over again just to be a meanie or to be difficult or any of these things. I hammer on these issues because it is really important that people understand the language that they are using. And I understand and have full respect for some influencers like Chris Rufo and like James Lindsay. I love them both dearly. They are doing the Lord's work. I usually won't say a thing about them, but they are among the people who are pushing this idea that these are one and the same, and they are not. And I think that it's important to have that conversation. These two things can exist separately from each other. Critical race theory doesn't need to be there for social emotional learning to be there, and vice versa. When they exist together, it's a whole other ball of wax. But the fact of the matter is that social emotional learning is really dangerous on its own. It doesn't need critical race theory to be dangerous. And this story that we're going to look at today is one example of that. So we're going to read this article. We're going to talk about what's going on. And then I am going to give you a definition of the difference between critical race theory and social emotional learning. But before we jump into that, guys, I do content almost every single day of the week around, I'm going to bring myself back up big. I do content almost every single day of the week around news, politics, culture, mostly focusing on critical race theory, social justice, fighting back against the woke insanity in your life. If you enjoy the work I'm doing, I would appreciate it if you would subscribe to my channel today. If you think you're subscribed, just do a quick double check for me because YouTube likes to make that decision for you sometime. If you're subscribed, please make sure you have notifications turned on. Mount that like button for me. Leave a comment to feed that algorithm. And if you really, really, really want to do me a solid, make sure you join me in my locals community. It's free to join at kb.locals.com. Every single video I put on YouTube ends up in locals. You don't even have to watch ads or any other nonsense. Plus, you get exclusive videos, and if you become a supporter in my locals community, you get access to exclusive perks, including 2 Zoom calls every single week. I spend about 6 hours on Zoom with my locals every single week. You also unlock all of the features in the platform, and it frankly is the best, nicest, most awesome place on the internet. If you want to become a supporter in my locals, it is less than buying a cup of coffee at a Starbucks. You can do it for $5 a month or more if you like, which I always appreciate, but you don't have to. You could do it for $50 a year, which gives you 2 months for free, or you can make a one-time gift if you want to support the work I'm doing. This is kb.locals.com. Become a supporter. It really helps me out, and I would love to get 100 new supporters by the end of the year. It's been a tough year. I understand. But I really do feel like the energy is changing in regards to this movement. And I'm so, so, so excited. I've got a book coming out next year about how to fight back against the woke. We're already scheming and doing little projects in my locals community. My locals are the very first people that I go to talk when I have new ideas. They're the very first people to hear about things. And I love working with them and, frankly, elevating the work that they're doing as well, because it's not just about me, it's about everyone. And one of the things I love to do is make sure I'm supporting the people in my community that are supporting me. We should all be having each other's backs. That's the only way this is going to work. So hopefully I'll see you in locals, and please and thank you. That's it. All right, let's jump into this story and let's see what is going on in New Hampshire. New Hampshire high school student sues school district and principal after he was suspended for saying there are only two genders. A New Hampshire student athlete and his mother are suing the school district after he was suspended from a football game for expressing his view that there's only two genders. The freshman student, only identified as MP in court documents, was discussing the difficulty of addressing a non binary person in Spanish with his friends on the school bus when another student interjected to argue with MP, there are other genders. After the short discussion on the bus, the student engaged in a debate over gender and sexuality in text messages. These messages were turned into the school administrators, who suspended MP for not respecting pronouns. Now, this is an example of social emotional learning. This is not an example of critical race theory. Do you see race involved in this discussion? No. This is an example of the result of the potential result, because it could come from other places too, of the potential result of social emotional learning. So let's talk about the difference. Let's talk about the difference. I've got this thread for the moment pinned to the top of my Twitter page, and I'm trying to listen. This is a tweet size comment. Okay. This is not the end all be all. There is no nuance in this. It is a single tweet. But what I'm trying to do is distill down into the most basic fundamental definitions of what you need to know. Okay? We can have discussions about the nuance. If you want to add more detail, you can leave a comment. But this is a tweet-sized chunk, and I don't want to hear about how I'm making generalizations. Critical race theory is teaching kids to judge people based on the color of their skin. Social emotional learning is surveying kids about what's going on inside their head and then performing psychological interventions to make sure they don't engage in wrongthink. What we're seeing in this article is nothing to do with race, has everything to do with getting into people's heads and saying, use the words we want you to use. Don't trust that creepy biology that tells you there are only two sexes. And by the way, I feel like I have to do a disclaimer, which annoys me enough as it is. I don't care if you're trans. I don't care if you're non-binary. Like, live your best life, man. Whatever you need to do to be happy, it is none of my business. However, what is my business is telling kids that there are more than two sexes, because there are not more than two sexes. There is male and there is female. That's it. So far as we are concerned, especially for high school students, the rest is, up for debate. Now, I also fully believe that we should be showing everyone a base level of respect and courtesy. I don't believe if someone asks me to use their pronouns and they're kind of weird, and I think they're weird, I'm still probably going to try to use them because I'm going to extend basic respect and courtesy up until the point where you're trying to exert power over me just to get me to bend the knee to show that you can. Then we're going to have a different problem. But generally speaking, I actually do believe that everyone should use base level respect and courtesy. If someone wants to be called something weird, it's their life, it's their business, whatever. It really doesn't affect me at all. But the point is that this is the school engaging in behaviors that are related to social emotional learning. It's about getting inside kids' head. This is social emotional learning. One of the types of surveys you're going to see is when they put up on the chalkboard and they have boy on one end of the chalkboard and they have girl at the other end, and they tell the kids when they're really young, go in and put this sticky note or post it or sticker where you feel you are on the gender identity spectrum. Do you feel you're a boy? Do you feel like you're a girl? Do you feel like you're somewhere in between? That's social emotional learning. Anytime they're surveying your kids about this stuff and then doing interventions, which this is an intervention, in order to get them to use the right words, say the right things. You're allowed to say this, you're not allowed to say that. You're not taking into consideration someone else's feelings when you're saying that. That's all social emotional learning. This is completely separate from critical race theory. This is legal in New Hampshire for the moment, even though New Hampshire has banned, not really, critical race theory. I know I'm hammering home this point, but I really, really, really want people to understand that these are two different beasts. They're two different beasts. Let's keep going. Where do we leave off? There it is. The lawsuit filed on November 4th in Rockingham Superior Court and obtained by DailyMail.com said that there is one game suspension for a student in September was in violation of the student's constitutional right to free speech and the New Hampshire Bill of Rights because he expressed his religious Catholic beliefs. The school is seeking, or excuse me, the student is seeking nominal damages against what the lawsuit defines as New Hampshire School Administrative Unit 16, the New Hampshire school district that includes Exeter High School in Exeter, Rockingham County, Exeter High School. By the way, a couple months ago, I live streamed a school board meeting where they were doing the equity discussion. You should go back and watch the live stream because on this live stream, the parents in this live stream were lit. The parents came to this presentation. They had like 3 or 4 different diversity coordinators and then teachers trying to explain to parents why they needed to do equity. And the parents came and asked all the right questions, and it was amazing. I was cheering through that Q&A. Anyway, that was this school. The same school. Same place. Exeter is one of the worst in New Hampshire. If you are in New Hampshire in this school district, man, it is bad. You need to pull your kids from the school. MP is also aiming to stop Exeter High School from continuing to enforce its gender nonconforming student policy because of what he says is an infringement on his First Amendment rights. Well, I mean, if the policy impacts what he is allowed to say, I definitely would agree with that, but I also, I know this is unpopular. I think the kids should be allowed to explore. I think the kids should be allowed to experiment. I do not believe in medical intervention before they're 18. I don't believe in medically transitioning before they're 18 just because there are too many X factors in regards to fertility, desistance rates, things like that. But I do think kids should be able to experiment. I do. I do think the kids should be able to try on different identities, for lack of a better word. Try them out. If they can't do that when they're kids, then when are they supposed to do it? This is how you learn. Experience is how you learn. You try something, you either get a good result or a bad result. And hopefully, through a process of experimentation, they grow into exactly who they want to be. MP and his mother are being represented by Cornerstone Action, a nonprofit Christian advocacy organization. They believe the school policy essentially penalizes students for their religious beliefs when they refuse to address non binary students with their chosen pronouns to describe their gender identity. I'm going to be honest. I think this is a dumb fight. And I don't think I'm not a Christian. You guys know this. I'm a deeply spiritual person. I am not a Christian. But it doesn't sound very Christian to me to not do something basic like using the right pronoun if it's not a power play. If this is just someone saying, "Hey, I would prefer you do this." Like usually if you want people to show you baseline respect, you've got to show them baseline respect, and this is one of those instances where I think I mean, you could actually make the argument that they're trying to force their religious beliefs on another person, which I'm not cool with at all in any way. You can make the argument. I'm not saying I agree with it, but you could actually absolutely make that argument. The student does not deny that he violated the gender nonconforming students policy, the lawsuit states. In fact, he denied and will continue to deny that any person can belong to gender other than male or female. The student will never refer to any individual using plural pronouns such as they, using contrived pronouns such as z, or with any similar terminology that reflects values which the student does not share. I mean, you don't have to agree with someone's lifestyle choice in order to extend to them basic respect and courtesy. And I quite frankly think, listen, I don't think the student should have been suspended. That's dumb. We can all agree that that's dumb. However, I also don't think that it is the strong I think the free speech argument is strong. If the student had just stopped at the free speech argument for me, you would have no complaints. I'd be cool. But they're not. And now they're talking about using their religion to try to using their religion as an argument. And listen, again, I don't begrudge you worshiping however you want to worship. I just think that there is such a thing as basic respect and courtesy. And if you want other people with different points of view and different perspectives to respect you, you have to offer that respect to them. You don't have to agree with their lifestyle. You don't have to live their lifestyle. I just think that this is one of the dumbest moves that the right makes every single time, and it detracts from what the real argument is. If they had just stopped at the free speech argument, cool. We'd have no complaints. But they didn't. Ugh. It's too bad. But the policy also contains a provision that the intentional or persistent refusal to respect a student's gender identity is a violation of this policy. You can make an argument that that is a violation of their free speech. The lawsuit describes how a student in the student's Spanish class asked students to introduce themselves. One student informed the class they considered themselves to be non binary and wanted to be addressed by the they as a singular pronoun. The lawsuit then details how MP later chatted with friends on the school bus over complications of using a third person pronoun when referring to themselves in Spanish. That actually sounds kind of legit. And by the way, that's a different argument than the religious argument. Again, this is one of those things that they just stopped there. Stop there. It's like a legit argument. That's legit. The third person pronoun to refer to a group of men is ellos, but referring to a group of women, it's ellas. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. I never took Spanish. The lawsuit details how a female student identified as AG overheard the conversation and told the friends there are more than two genders. To which MP responded, no, there isn't. There's only two genders. After MP got off the bus, he was texted by the student who had confronted him on the bus. She pressed MP on the topic of gender, demanding, give me one valid reason why there's only two genders. The lawsuit states. The two had a contentious exchange of texts on the issue. The lawsuit states it was those texts which were handed over to the school's administration that resulted in MP's suspension for reportedly both failing to respect another student's gender pronouns and for inappropriate language used in his text, such as bozo and STFU. Okay, that's dumb. The school is in the wrong there. Number one, it doesn't even seem like this text message conversation took place at the school. It doesn't even seem like you can even make the argument if it was on the school bus, but it seems like they got off the school bus, they were going home, and it took place somewhere else that isn't school. And even if it did take place at school, I mean, can you really make the argument that something over a cell phone is happening at school? I don't know. I think that the whole argument that the student should have been suspended over this is ridiculous and stupid. I just don't think the religious argument is the best thing to counter it. The student now suing the school was pulled out of his early morning science class and the athletic director by the athletic director and the varsity football coach. They stated the text showed that MP was not respecting pronouns and that he needed to respect how people identify. Okay, this is social emotional learning. This is where we start to get into social emotional learning. Except in most cases, SEL isn't going to show up as a stern talking to and a punishment. It's going to show up much more insidiously. This isn't even official SEL, okay? This is kind of the basic idea of SEL is getting in kids' heads saying it's okay to think this, it's not okay to think that, it's okay to speak this, it's not okay to speak that. Don't you care about other people's feelings? Because that's what we should really care about is other people's feelings. So this is like scratching the surface. This isn't even that bad. But here we are. Balto Demi was going to suspend him for playing football for 1 week, but then reduced the ban to 1 game after his mother protested that MP had done nothing wrong. According to the complaint, the football coach replied, "I know, but times are changing." So this kid got a little punishment for his point of view. What they're telling him is that you're not allowed to have that point of view. You're not allowed to have that opinion. You're not allowed to express it. If you do, we're going to slap you on the wrist. That's what they're saying. MP claims through the lawsuit that his punishment was using the first school's policy for gender nonconforming students was a violation of his First Amendment rights and a violation of the New Hampshire Bill of Rights, which he's probably correct on both counts. He also believes staff at the school did not have the authority to punish him because his text messages were from an off-campus conversation that was started by another student. Exactly. All stronger arguments than the religious ones. Listen, like, I understand, I don't mind religious people at all. Like, live your best life, man. Who really cares? But I think that sometimes people who are uber religious, they tend to bring that into every single one of these conversations, and they don't step back and think that maybe this isn't the best strategy. Like, I'm sorry, Christians, I'm sorry. I'm just gonna say it. You're not going to appeal to people like me if you take the Christians are oppressed argument. I'm a deeply spiritual person. People think I'm an atheist. I'm not. Not in any way. But you are not going to appeal to people like me if you take the Christians are oppressed argument. You're just not. For many, many reasons that I'm not going to get into here. It's just not your best strategy. Regardless of what defendants may think about these words, MP did not use profane or insulting language towards any person while in the school building, on a school bus, during school activities, or on school property in any of the events leading up to the athletic suspension and this case. DailyMail.com was directed to the superintendent when reaching out for a comment. So far, the school has not commented. We are in the process of reviewing the complaint with legal counsel and will be able to share a statement once we've had a more complete review. You can see the whole complaint is there. I will link over to this in the description below. But guys, the point I want to make here is this. We are fighting battles in the schools on multiple fronts. And I do think that it is important for us to be hyper mindful of what types of battle we're fighting on any given occasion. I understand that critical race theory is the big thing. We agree on that. But there are so many more insidious things that have nothing to do with critical race theory. And if we're not using the proper language, if we're not defining things correctly, if we're conflating things, if we're ignoring some aspects of one thing because it's not convenient, like, that sets us up to fail. This has nothing to do with critical race theory. It doesn't. But do you think this is important? Do you think protecting the free speech rights of children is important? I do. That's why I do all this. So we've got to just be a little, like, my position is that we should be more disciplined and that I trust you guys to be smart enough to understand the difference. And I'm going to hold you to that expectation. We've got to understand the difference. And I'm going to do my very best to explain it. I'm going to do my very best to break it down. I won't always get it right the first time because sometimes I have to experiment with how to explain these things to see what works and what doesn't, because this is all new. We're all new here. But the big thing is that we need to be aware of what's going on and we need to make sure we're approaching it realistically. All right, guys, that's all I've got for this video. Again, if you want to support the work I'm doing, please make sure you join me in Locals, kb.locals.com. Become a supporter if you really enjoy it. And I hope, again, you consider subscribing to the channel. Mount that like button on the way out the door. That's all I've got for right now. I'll see you guys soon.